The return of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash to WCW in 1996 immediately changed the whole professional wrestling landscape. Hall showed up to WCW Nitro on the 27th of May 1996, and 2 weeks later Kevin Nash made his return to the company as Hall's mystery partner. And the week after that, WCW Nitro began its well-documented 83-week winning streak against WWF Raw in the television ratings. This isn't to say it was just Hall and Nash who turned things around for WCW. There were other things going on that just made Nitro more exciting to watch, including the fact that it was broadcasted live every week. But Hall, Nash, and the whole New World Order storyline was the catalyst for Nitro's success. Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash were always seen as the originals, the forefathers of the New World Order. And while WCW had trouble when it came to progressing the NWO storyline in a manner that made sense, the company did decide to have all three men fight among each other as time went on. Some people see this as a mistake, others see it as completely inevitable and predictable. But the fact that the originators of the NWO would go to war against each other at different times tells you all you really need to know about the progression of the New World Order angle. It all got a little messy. I've talked previously about the NWO splinter groups and the battles between Kevin Nash's Wolfpac and Hogan's NWO Hollywood, but while this divide of the New World Order was taking place on television, another breakup also took place within the group, the breakup of the Outsiders. And the angle that WCW came up with in order to tell this story was extremely questionable, to say the least. Today's video looks at the 1998 breakup of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and one of WCW's most controversial storylines. The Outsiders were extremely successful in WCW when it came to tag team title reigns. Before the split up took place, Hall and Nash were 5-time WCW tag team champions, and although some of this comes down to title reigns only lasting a few weeks and the tag titles getting handed to Hall and Nash without matches even taking place, it still tells us that Hall and Nash were consistently at the top of the WCW tag division. The Outsiders went to war with teams like Harlem Heat and the Steiner Brothers during late 96 and 97, becoming the company's top heel tag team in the process, while also simultaneously bringing the fight to World Championship Wrestling as part of the NWO group. Towards the end of 1997, Kevin Nash suffered an injury that would keep him off TV for a few weeks, and so Scott Hall took part in more singles matches than usual. Hall found himself winning the World War III 60-man Battle Royal, a victory that earned Hall a WCW World title shot at a later date, and Kevin Nash made his return at this pay-per-view to help his NWO teammate, and then within a few months, the Outsiders were once again tag team champions. Scott Hall got his World Heavyweight title shot against Sting at Uncensored 1998, but Hall was unsuccessful. And almost immediately following the Uncensored show, Scott Hall was taken off TV. Eric Bischoff had decided that Scott needed to enter rehab. It's been reported that Bischoff made his decision after the March 16, 1998 episode of Nitro, when Hall and Nash showed up completely wasted. And WCW just had enough. Hall had to disappear for a while, get himself sorted out, and his job would be waiting for him when he came back. While Scott Hall was away from WCW television, the NWO split in two with the formation of the Wolfpac. The NWO Red and Black quickly became fan favourites during their battle with NWO Hollywood, and the natural assumption was that Scott Hall would join his old tag partner Kevin Nash in the Wolfpac once returning to WCW television. At Slamboree 1998, Hall returned for a tag team match, the Outsiders vs Sting and the Giant, and Scott Hall got a great ovation when he walked into the arena with the red and black Wolfpac colours. Towards the end of the match though, Hall turned on Nash, giving NWO Hollywood's Giant and WCW's Sting the tag team titles. Sting looked confused at what just happened, but Hall made a big decision here. He decided to leave his longtime partner to side with the NWO Black and White. It was a big deal when you think about it. As mentioned at the start of this video, Hall and Nash played a big part in making WCW the #1 wrestling company in America. But now, it looked like the two men were going to be squaring off against each other as they both represented different versions of the New World Order. There was no deep reasoning for Hall's decision either really. The company were more focused on Sting and which NWO faction he was going to join. Scott Hall's personal problems continued during mid-1998 and the Hall vs Nash feud was put on the back burner until Scott sorted himself out. Scott disappeared briefly from TV to once again enter rehab, but he came back for the famous July 6th episode of Monday Nitro. Hall was chosen by the New World Order to face Bill Goldberg. If Scott won, then Goldberg wouldn't face Hollywood Hogan later in the evening for the World Heavyweight Championship. Not only did Goldberg beat Hall, but Goldberg also defeated Hogan. NWO Hollywood got completely embarrassed during this episode of Monday Nitro, and so the next week someone had to take the blame. Hulk Hogan called out Scott, challenging Hall to a match while blaming him for the loss of the WCW Championship. Hall pretty much said that he's only part of the New World Order these days because it's a paycheck, but if Hogan wants to have a match later in the show, then the bad guy would be happy to oblige. Hogan vs Hall took place in the main event spot. Eric Bischoff served as the special referee, a referee who didn't want to count Hogan's shoulders to the mat. And towards the end of the bout, Diamond Dallas Page hit the ring to attack Hogan. This led to the Disciple getting involved too, and eventually Kevin Nash hit the ring. It looked like the Outsiders were back together, the crowd cheered as the two reunited, but Hall decided to once again attack Big Sexy and side with NWO Hollywood. Scott Hall had just passed Hogan's gut check, and so things would continue on as they did, with Hall and Nash being on opposite teams. On WCW Thunder later in the week, the show opened up with an interview with Kevin Nash, an interview that took place after Nitro went off the air. Mike Tenay brings up the fact that both Hall and Nash have been silent in regards to their split back at Slamboree, and Nash tells the truth. Big Sexy says that Hall has been having personal problems. We all know that Hall had been disappearing from TV due to him checking into rehabilitation facilities, and also Hall had gotten himself arrested at one point. But Nash was forthcoming on television here in regards to Hall's problems in his personal life. To keep things kayfabe a little, Nash says that he stayed away from Hall in hopes that he'd see the light, but Hall won't talk to Nash. And this is all really eating away at Big Sexy. Nash says Bischoff and Hogan are pushing Hall to the edge. Kevin thinks Hogan and Bischoff are using Hall to get at him. And Nash says he might have to show some tough love and beat some sense into his best friend. The takeaway from this interview though is the fact that WCW acknowledged on TV that Scott Hall had personal issues that he was working through. WCW, and indeed the WWF to a certain extent, was all about blurring the lines between what was real and what wasn't. And I'm not going to bang on about what's morally right and what isn't, you guys don't come here to listen to that stuff. But it can't be ignored either that bringing Scott's personal demons into the storyline was seen widely as a pretty scummy thing to do. The general consensus was that WCW was using a man's very real downfall in hopes of gaining ratings. Eric Bischoff years later said that he regrets this decision, and to be fair also, it's not like the WWF weren't pushing the envelope at every given opportunity. This was the late 90s after all. But the whole thing with Scott was seen as pretty low because Hall indeed was having these problems away from the cameras. It's worth pointing out too that Hall wasn't legitimately working while under the influence during any of these segments or matches. Hall enjoyed a few drinks after the shows of course, but he wasn't intoxicated while working this program with Kevin Nash, at least according to Scott Hall. Hall comes out later on Thunder and he calls the Kevin Nash interview a soap opera. The Outsiders' relationship was always based on money, and when Scott was down and out, it wasn't Nash who came to Hall with financial assistance, it was Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan. The following week, Hall had another interview. Scott said he got tired of doing all the work and carrying Kevin Nash during their time together, and Scott Hall can't understand why he used to look at Nash like a big brother when in reality Nash is nothing but an embarrassment. Clearly, Kevin Nash vs Scott Hall was going to happen on pay-per-view, but fans would have to wait around 3 months before seeing the Battle of the Outsiders. It's also a match that turned out way different from what people were expecting, as WCW tried to turn Scott Hall's demons into a full-blown storyline. Hall formed a tag team with the Giant, and the two men battled Nash and Sting later on Nitro, the WCW Tag Team Champions, and Hall and the Giant ended up winning the titles after interference from Bret Hart. 2 weeks later, Sting and Nash got a rematch, but the Giant got his team DQ'd. Once again, Scott Hall disappeared briefly from television, and on the September 10th, 1998 episode of WCW Thunder, Hall's drinking problem was again brought up on television. JJ Dillon said Hall hasn't been around because he's spending time on the golf course and spending time on the beach, but Hall has to come back later in the week for a pay-per-view match. Hall is scheduled to take on Conan of the NWO Wolfpac. Scott showed up to attack Kevin Nash during the Thunder main event, and the commentators talked about how Scott looked a little off and how Scott was looking a little wobbly. Eric Bischoff laughed at the camera, saying that Scott Hall was out of control, and when the NWO returned to the backstage area, the cameras caught Scott having a drink. At Fall Brawl 1998, all subtlety was thrown out the window when Scott Hall showed up wasted, and the fans simply didn't know how to react. Scott went through his survey routine while still sipping his drink, and it hits you here that the folks in charge at WCW really thought that seeing someone in this state would be entertaining. The commentary team made a bunch of jokes as Scott drank throughout the match, a match that was as bad as you'd expect it to be, and a match that Scott Hall lost via submission. The same thing happened the next night on Monday Nitro. Tony Schiavone says WCW doesn't condone Scott Hall's actions and WCW doesn't find this funny at all. And keep in mind that just one night previous at Fall Brawl, the commentary team made all the jokes they possibly could about Scott Hall's state. Hall faced Lex Luger here, and due to Scott's antics during the match, Eric Bischoff came down to stop the bout. Bischoff says to Hall that he can't protect him from everything and he needs to get his head straight. And then Kevin Nash comes down to try and talk sense into his old friend. WCW had completely thrown out the black and white versus Wolfpac story here for this angle in a bid to make things more realistic. Scott wants to know where Nash was when he was at his lowest, and Nash doesn't have any answers. Hall then begins screaming at Eric before taking another drink, and then Hall throws it all back up over his boss. Lex Luger can be heard during the segment calling Scott a disgrace. His boss and his old friend aren't going to talk any sense into him here, and again, the audience doesn't know how to react. Failing to realise that the storyline was tanking, WCW had Hall go through the same thing on WCW Thunder later in the week. On the September 21st episode of Nitro, Hall came out during a mid-card match thinking that it was time for the main event. Dusty Rhodes brought Hall back to the locker room while telling Scott he needs to sort out his problems. Hall was replaced by the Giant in the main event tag team match, but Scott still came out. He threw the referee out of the ring and he challenged Kevin Nash to a fight. Hall takes a wild swing at his former partner, but he falls straight to the mat. And Hall tries one more time to take out Kevin, but he gets embarrassed again by Big Sexy. Nash has a few words for Scott. Nash says that he's lost his best friend because he doesn't even know who Scott Hall is anymore. Nash decides that it's time to show Hall that tough love he talked about before, and a challenge is made. Kevin Nash wants to face Scott in a match at Halloween Havoc. All Scott has to do is show up. And so the match was made official, and you have to step back for a moment and wonder what could have been here. Hall and Nash were such a big part in the rise of WCW and the Nitro program. When Diesel and Razor left the WWF to declare war on World Championship Wrestling, the wrestling world instantly stopped what they were doing and they paid attention to WCW. The eventual showdown between these two outsiders had so many storyline possibilities, so many potential outcomes, and really, World Championship Wrestling had a golden opportunity to turn Hall vs Nash into a must-see main event that had potentially massive ramifications for the company as a whole. But they decided to do this stuff instead and completely waste away any potential big or important matchups. Imagine knowing in 1996 that the outsiders, the originators of the New World Order, would split up because one guy couldn't stop drinking, and just let that sink in for a moment. You'd think that the company had completely lost their minds, and you can't even bring up the whole armchair booking and hindsight being 2020 argument either, because introducing Hall's problems into a wrestling angle in the first place is questionable enough to make you reconsider the original booking choices. Hall wasn't around for the October 5th episode of Nitro, and so the NWO Wolfpac decided to go looking for him. Nash said there's one of around 5 places Hall could be, and so the Wolfpac began looking in bars around the area. After visiting a few places, Hall is found and Nash gives him a beating, ending with Scott getting laid out beside a toilet. On Thunder later in the week, Scott was in the bar once again and he issued a challenge to Kevin, but Hall was clearly in no shape to fight anyone. It was a setup though. Nash went looking for Hall while Scott travelled to Thunder. Hall took care of Wolfpac members Lex Luger and Conan with the help of Stevie Ray and Vincent, and so the commentators believe that maybe Hall was just conning Nash all along and he was absolutely fine. This wasn't the case, however. On the next episode of Nitro, Kevin Nash declared Halloween Havoc will be Scott Hall's last call, and out walks Hall holding a drink. After a little trash talking, Nash chases Hall out of the building, and Nash also chases after Hall's limousine, but nothing came of this. We don't see the car chase again throughout Monday Nitro. And then, the next week, it was back to the bar for Scott Hall. Scott spent the evening in the arena bar, even though he had a big Wolfpac vs Hollywood 6-man tag match on Nitro. Before the match began, Kevin Nash was seen wearing an outsider shirt, holding a cup and looking pretty wasted. The match began without Kevin Nash, and it looked like Big Sexy had also fallen off the wagon. Nash eventually made it down to the ring. It looked like he was going to join his old friend once again, but Nash had tricked everyone. He hadn't been drinking at all, and Scott Hall got his drink booted in his face before the match got thrown out. Hall thought it was funny as his NWO teammates brought him back to the locker room. And so, Hall vs Nash took place at Halloween Havoc. It was placed right in the middle of the card, and honestly, what happens in the ring was pretty good in my opinion. This isn't a bad match at all, but it's just a little short. Hall comes out holding a drink that ends up getting thrown all over Kevin Nash, and from here, Scott Hall absolutely destroys his former tag team partner. He's completely sober. Hall beats Nash up so bad on the outside that a trainer comes down to tell Nash to quit and go back to the locker room. Hall grabs a microphone and he tells Nash to take the advice and leave, but Big Sexy gets back inside the ropes and Hall delivers some of those signature right hands. Nash can't defend himself as Hall goes to work. Scott tries to end it early with an outsider's edge, but Nash pushes his opponent away and the big man falls in the corner. Hall goes straight back on the offense after delivering more right hands. Scott backs off and Kevin asks for more. He's goading Hall to come at him. Kevin Nash isn't fighting back, he's letting Hall get all his aggression out. Nash eventually sends Hall from turnbuckle to turnbuckle before hitting a sidewalk slam. The two men then slug it out while down on the mat, and Kevin Nash gets an opportunity to jackknife his old partner, but Hall escapes, putting over the fact that these two competitors know each other all too well. Nash rips off his Wolfpac shirt, Hall gets back inside the ring, and the match resets. Both men know where they're at now, and both men can begin rethinking their initial strategies. The two lock up as if they're just starting the match, and Nash uses his strength to his advantage. Hall looks at Nash wondering what he needs to do to put the big man down. And when both men get back to their feet, Hall has limited success when going after the big man's arm. Nash destroys Hall with a clothesline. From here, it's all Kevin Nash. Big Sexy punishes Hall by going after his back, and the referee has to step in at one point and ask Hall if he wants to continue. Nash brushes the referee aside and the beating continues. Nash makes fun of Hall by pretending to open up a can, and Big Sexy screams at Hall, asking if his opponent has had enough. Scott tries to keep fighting, but it's no use. Nash puts Hall down with a big boot, and when Scott tries to get back to his feet, Kevin just waits for him. Nash then mocks Hall again before delivering a thunderous jackknife that gets a great crowd reaction. All Nash needs to do now is pin his opponent. Nash asks the fans if they want to see one more. Hall takes another jackknife, And then Kevin Nash decides to walk away from the match. Kevin didn't care about gaining a victory over his old partner, he wanted to prove a point. Scott doesn't gloat about getting a victory here, he picks himself up and he gets out of the ring. The next night on Monday Nitro, Scott approached Kevin and Hall said that he's prepared to change his ways. Nash says he didn't care about the victory, he always said he wanted to beat sense into his old partner, and that's exactly what he did. And so, just for a brief moment, the Outsiders were reunited and it looked like things were back on track. But it was all a setup. The Giant runs in and Kevin Nash gets put through a wall. Towards the end of 1998 though, when Hall got kicked out of the NWO, the Outsiders reunited as if nothing had happened, and this eventually led to Kevin Nash defeating Bill Goldberg at Starrcade 98, and then the finger poke of doom happened. Hall and Nash would remain as a tag team. Following Halloween Havoc, the stuff about Hall's personal problems was also dropped from TV. WCW got a lot of flack for doing the angle, including some harsh words from Scott Hall's ex-wife. What should have been a big money match turned out to be something that a lot of fans prefer to forget about thanks to the storyline. Hogan and Ultimate Warrior headlined Halloween Havoc, not Hall and Nash, and on the grand scheme of things, the breakup of Nash and Hall in 1998 was inconsequential, seeing as the Outsiders were back together in a matter of weeks. So to me, everything about the angle felt like a waste of time. It's a shame too, because Hall and Nash at Halloween Havoc really isn't that bad at all. They tried to bring a little emotion into the match, with Nash allowing Hall to hit him with everything he had, and Hall realising he wasn't going to overcome his former best friend. But it all could have meant a lot more if the main point of the storyline wasn't based around a man's real life problems. But that's it for this upload. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time.